Hello and welcome to Color Commentary. Today I am joined by Kiju Lee, a woman of many talents. She's an Enneagram 3, which you guys know is the achiever, and the oldest daughter of 3 in an Asian American family. A successful tech professional, and if you haven't seen her online, she is a DIY content creator with her page Homely Build. Oh, and of course, a loving wife. I think that's probably what inspires me the most about Kiju actually, is how she champions as a role of wife. And so we'll talk more about that as well. But Kiju and I met about a year ago, and I am so grateful for all the stories that she has shared in our private times. And I'm glad that she has agreed to come up here and kind of share with you all today. And so I have so many questions, but first I'm really sad I did not pop her podcast cherry. She is in another podcast recently, and that's a good thing. So if you guys want to listen to more about things that we might not touch upon here or we might refer to as well, I'll link that. But welcome, Kiju, to the podcast.
Thank you, Joey. Thank you for having me. It's good that you weren't my first because I got practice.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. But this is my first video podcast, and Kiju being who she is, she really challenged me to try it out, and also being my safety in doing it with me right now. So I hope you guys enjoy. So in the other podcast episode that you were in, you talked a lot about this love story you had with Chang, your husband, and also your decision to rebel in the love life itself. And so I want to touch upon that, but since you also shared that, I wanted to first kind of rewind to that upbringing and to your childhood, and even what took you to that point. Because me meeting you today, I see Kiju super successful, not just in your career itself, but just how you carry yourself, how you are as a person. But I bet that took a long time as well to get there. And yeah, I'd like you to paint a picture of what young Kiju in childhood days was like. Oldest daughter.
Yeah, well, I don't want to start with a grim topic.
Oh.
I would ask my husband, Chang, how was your childhood? And he would say he had only the best memories. For me, when I think of my childhood, I don't really think I was able to be a child. So I didn't really have a childhood where I could just be young and carefree and just be really dependent on my parents. It was mostly, I felt like an adult even as a kid. I remember my parents would go through things and they would tell it to me. And now I realize that wasn't right. You know, you should let your kid be a kid, but they were going through hard times. And me being the oldest, and they would always say I'm mature, a lot of burden was unintentionally placed on me. It's not like they wanted to, but growing up as the oldest, I think it wasn't a spoken value that they enforced on me, that you have to be the oldest, you have to be the most responsible. It wasn't strictly placed on me, but I felt it with unspoken ways. For example, I think I just wanted to naturally please my parents. And I knew that the only way I can do so is by helping out around the house, by being a good student, by not causing trouble. I actually remember there was one spoken event where they would say, oh, your brothers, they will do fine as long as you do fine, as long as you do well, because they will look up to you, see how successful you are, and they'll mimic you. And I think that was very hard on me as a kid because I felt like I have to be perfect. I think a part of me is naturally that way. I always desire to be perfect, but maybe a part of it was nurture.
How old were you when that kind of memory, do you remember?
I think it's ever since my brothers were born. So our age gap is pretty wide. I have a brother who's 5 years younger and 7 years younger than me, which is not maybe as much as some other siblings. But I remember we'd be in the back seat of the car. I would sit in the middle in between two car seats, and I have two bottles. And I'm sleepy. I want to go to bed too. You want to sleep in the car and be carried up upstairs to your room. But I would sit there carrying those two bottles for my toddler brothers, and I wouldn't say anything. I would just do it. Even though I wanted not to, I wanted to just rest. I wanted to sleep. I think that's just embodies exactly what my childhood was like from the day my brothers were born to maybe even now. A lot less now, but yeah, I always felt like I have to take care of myself and my brothers and my parents.
So then, like, there is this Enneagram 3 saying for childhood, like, when they are growing up, they wanted to hear, like, you are loved for simply being you, you know? Like, what would you say that would have meant to you growing up? Do you feel like you ever got to hear that from where you needed to hear that from?
So I never knew what I wanted to hear from my parents. I know that they love me and they really expressed that love for me with words. Like they would say, I love you. But I didn't really know what the problem was that I had with my parents that I would label now as generational trauma. Like I didn't know how to express that with words. I actually met a therapist last year and we discussed a lot about family, generational trauma. And she would ask me a lot of the times, what would little Kiju have wanted? What do you think she would have wanted to hear? And it was not something I could come up with that one session. It took multiple sessions for me. The words I wanted to hear from them, I found out were 수고했어, which is...
How do you say that in English? 수고했어, like...
You had a good...
It's like the 고생 plus the success combined.
It's like you've done well despite the hardship, maybe?
Enough to
it was arduous, but you pulled through. Good job. It's so much in just that one word. And even though they expressed their love for me, I never doubted that they don't love me. But I think I wanted them to say, I know what you're doing. I see you. Thank you for all that you do for your brothers. 수고했어. That's what I wanted to hear.
Wow.
So now I tell myself, my therapist said, like, talk to little Kiju. You parent her now. And say, 수고했어. It was hard.
Yeah.
You wanted to just be a kid. But you still did it. And I'm proud of you. 수고했어.
Wow. Wow. I think that's just like a really great therapy practice you just shared as well with the 수고했어 and like all these things that you did do. And being an Enneagram 3 too, which you naturally are one perfectionistic, you're naturally achieving and you do well in all those things, right? So it can almost be hard to see the hard part of it almost because you do things so well, you know, like it could look effortless because you might make it look effortless. Like when you do your DIYs, it looks so hard, but it also is like, oh, Kiju makes it look so easy, you know, like how did you start to learn how to balance that for yourself where it's like, I have a side of me that could seem effortless outwardly, but like you're carrying actually a lot of things within, like a lot of the trauma that you've carried, a lot of experiences in general where there is that hard work. Do you ever feel like you have to prove that to others, if not just to your parents, or what does that side look like?
That's definitely a personality trait of mine where I want to seem like I can do everything so well, so easily. What do you mean it's difficult? It was so easy for me. That is just, I don't know why, but I want to pretend like I can do everything so well on the first try. I don't require any hard work. And that I realized is so toxic, not only to other people because it's a misrepresentation of what actually goes on behind the scenes, but for myself too, because I start to believe that I don't require hard work. I should be able to do this in one go. Like, what do you mean I failed? That started to affect me and it kind of put me down. Like, oh, I'm not that great. My self-esteem went down a lot. And I try to just brush it off and say, it's just part of being human. But I really want to recommend this book that I read, that I came across. It's called The Mindset. And it's basically talking about two types of mindsets. One is a fixed mindset, which is like, I'm fixed. I can't change. This is who I am. You can't really grow from there. But the growth mindset is, I could grow. I could change. I'm not set in the way I am right now. And if I put in hard work and effort, I will get there one day. Like I could see progress. And I realize that I am totally a fixed mindset because I'm saying I have these talents, these gifts that my parents, God gave me. It's fixed. Either I'm perfect at it from the beginning or I'm not. And I'm just not good at this. So that leaves no room for growth. And so I really started challenging myself. If every day I'm doing something to improve, I will see progress. I might not be good at it now, but I will get better in the future. I know it's such a simple concept that every young child learns, but so many of us, I think, have that fixed mindset.
Yeah.
So when I go through my projects and it's hard and it doesn't work the way I want to, before it's immediately like, oh, you're not that good. You're a fraud. Or I'm coding and, my project or something's not going the way I want it to. Like, you're an imposter. Are you even an engineer? Like, those kinds of words would immediately come to mind. Now it's like, it's okay. You just haven't learned this topic yet, or you don't have that time, the experience yet, but it doesn't mean you're not good. You could be if you just keep trying. It's like a very important mind shift that happened for me.
So then growing up, how do you think you saw that fixed mindset really become your go-to? Like, whether it was with the upbringing of your parents, or was it like they had always expected that from the start as well? Or was that just something you were putting on yourself from the start?
I think it's both. I think I wanted to please my parents, and I knew that being a good student, as when you're a child, like that was the most important thing for me. A part of me was, I think it was internal. Like I did want to be better. And for me, it's always, I want to be better than my friends.
Yeah.
And it is
competitive.
Toxic.
Yeah,
it's competitive. It's toxic sometimes, where I would get upset if anyone outperforms me. I don't have, like, I could be happy for my friends too, but
you have to be doing better,
I have to be the best. Like the high school rankings, for example, it's like, I have to be better. I don't care about like the top people that I can't reach, but I have to be better than my friends. I
resonate with that. Yeah. Like for me, I don't blame my parents at all, but my dad had this saying, like, we're not mediocre, like, and it was just like, mediocre doesn't belong here almost. Like something like mediocrity is not for us. Something like that. But that word mediocre was such a, worse than a curse word almost, if we had that kind of mindset. And he didn't say it with like we're not mediocre. It was just like, it was like an identity, like almost trying to be empowering, right? But like, it was also like, if I'm not the best, like I can't be average in any way. And that's what I carried for myself, And so like, for me, even today where I'm like, oh, this is not the best, then like there is a lot of self-thoughts and stuff as well. So it's so interesting, like what it could be that was like instilled as a kid, but that really then shaped you or me or so many, I feel like, immigrant children in general, whose parents really wanted the best, right? But how to navigate those conversations.
So funny that your dad said that, because my dad, it's totally different, but he would tell me in a very joking, lighthearted manner, like, oh, stop studying, just get straight A's, but don't study. Like he would always want us to do like a family activity, which for us was watching baseball together every night. And it's like 4 hours long, but he's like, if I'm studying, he's like, don't study, get straight A's, but don't study. Come on, let's watch baseball. And I'm like, so the standards are set though. Like, you can't.
The A's are non-negotiable.
You have to get your A's. So that is part of my identity.
So that like, get this without oh wow, interesting. And I'm so curious, like whether it's your dad or your mom or whoever, but like what their study life looked like growing up.
I saw my mom's college transcript. There were a lot of C's. Who knows?
Yeah. So then I'm curious also how your parents translated their parenting to your brothers from your perception as an oldest child. Because there's also like a boy. That is something within Korean or Asian families.
This is where I feel kind of bad for my brothers. I think I set the expectations too high. Not to sound cocky in any way, but I'm naturally a driven person. Regardless of my parents, because we have the same set of parents, but I think I'm more naturally driven. My brothers weren't as interested in being a high achieving student. They were more interested in games and sports and all those things. Something my parents would constantly say is, your sister had less, and she had less opportunities, and she's still outperforming. She is your like knowledge base. Like she can teach you how she got her A's. You can just follow her, like she can tell you everything you need to know. Like, why can't you do, as well as she did or even better? And they would say in Korean, 누나 반만 따라가. At least go halfway.
Wow.
As where your
so you
sister
can't even do half?
Exactly, yeah.
Wow, dang.
So I think they were harsher on my brothers.
Yeah. In a different way. Oh, that's so interesting. And then in the podcast you were in, they were talking a little bit about college Kiju and seeing that there were some anxieties or insecurities that were in that season of life. And so I would be curious to know maybe what was going on in that season where you did work hard. And of course, there are all these things that got you to UCLA, which is a very like competitive school as well. But would you be able to share a little bit on
I
that?
think the hardest thing for us at that time was my dad, his business. He got scammed and like the car we had, everything was repoed. One night, someone came.
Like in that Korean drama scene, kind of.
I think so. I had to be the unfortunate one to open the door. And he said, we have to take the car. And so for like 3, I want to say even 4 years, we didn't have a single car in our house of 5. My parents took the bus to work. I lived in the dorms at the time, but every time I would want to come home, because our house was also in Koreatown, so it's like a 30-minute drive from UCLA, I would take the bus home. And I would be so jealous of my friends whose parents would pick them up from school and they would get their entire dirty basket of laundry so that they can just take it home and bring it back. For me, I just either embarrassing, but didn't really do my laundry that often, or I would just do it all at school, because I can't really bring it back and forth. Being the oldest, I felt a lot of burden falling on me because I felt like I have to be the one that lifts my family back up. Yeah, I just felt a lot of burden. My brothers are too young. I'm the next person in line to get a job and support the family. There was just a lot of burden, uncertainty about what I even want to do. Do I just give up my happiness so that I could make money and support my family? It was a conflict of what is my calling versus what can make me money. So I was anxious. I was very negative. I don't think I had really good mentors at the time either. So I just felt lost a lot of times.
Dang. You were studying for dentistry at that time. Was that also with the mindset of like that would be high output of money / balance?
I knew I had to make a lot of money. I also knew that my parents would love if I had a prestigious job. And the only thing I can think of was like medical field, right? As any Asian kid. And I was first thinking, I'll be a doctor. And then I was volunteering at Ronald Reagan UCLA hospital. And it was so scary. You would shadow doctors and see procedures. And I just hated being at the hospital. Like it was just scary for me and I didn't like volunteering and I knew that was just not for me. And so I was like, the next thing that can make equally as much money and I can have a lucrative lifestyle and support my family, but also I'm still a doctor, can be a dentist. Also hated it.
Was that the plan? And then, because I know you switched it. When you graduated, what did you end up graduating with? And like more so mentality-wise of like, was there like a worry of what it looked like for family as a whole? Because I know the boot camp didn't come till later.
So I graduated with biology.
Okay.
And did all my prerequisites for dentistry. I was still working at the dental office. I was still applying, getting interviews. That was about a year after I graduated. So I was still doing all these things.
Okay.
So I would have a gap year or two. I don't remember. During this time of when I was working at the dental office I was like, A, I really hate dentistry. And B, the next thing that came to my mind was the financial aspect of it. And the schools that wanted me were like $600K plus, and I really thought I'm trying to make money by being a dentist, but I'm also
I'm going
to be in a huge debt. Yeah. That means for the majority of my early career, I won't be able to even support my family. Yeah. So is this really the wise thing to do? You say two birds with one stone, like you can't hit any of the birds. So I knew, that wasn't what I wanted to do. And the biggest push was from my mom, because when I told her I'm thinking of quitting dentistry, she said, yes.
Oh,
yeah, because she saw me work once and she said, I don't like that. The patient's spit gets all over you. And honestly, it does. And it's honestly gross. But you just do it because it's just part of your job. And just try to cover it as much as you can with like the goggles and the mask. But
Ew,
She
that
hated
is
it.
gross. I thought the goggles or whatever covered enough, but that's still gross.
It's still gross.
Tikios.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. People don't realize the debt that comes with the doctor's route, which, right, someday there will be a comfort. Right, like you're saying, for the first part of your early career, it'll be like stress with paying that off. And I'm glad there was alignment from your parents. With all of that, I'm hearing a lot of like the 고생 you must have had to go throughout childhood and even into college. Then you found boot camp. Or like, how'd you get into software engineering? What made you think this was then right for you with your personality or who you are?
It was really God, because I would have never imagined I could do software engineering.
Why didn't you think you could?
It was just never on my radar, and
Okay.
it just seemed like such a guy thing. I couldn't imagine a woman being a software engineer. It just never registered. But one day my friend said, let's go visit her friend in San Francisco. And we did. And this guy did a boot camp. He also went to UCLA, but he was like a dancer. And I always thought like he's not the most studious type of guy. And then I heard that he went to a boot camp and got a job as an engineer. And I was like, whoa, well, if he did it, I feel like I can do it too. And like he and some other friends were showing us the office. I think it was DoorDash maybe, or one of these offices that we visited, and it looked so cool. Like, open floor plan, like snack bar. And I was like, dang, like maybe this is something I can try, especially because I don't have to do 4 years of college again.
Right.
And so that gave me the confidence
Oh, wow.
to try it.
Yeah.
So I studied first on my own, because to even get into the boot camp, you have to do a test.
Okay.
So I started studying, and then I applied to the one later, which is fate, because my husband Chang also wanted to do an earlier one and tried to do an online one, but he was like, no, and he pushed it off, and he did that exact one that I was in.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
I feel like your job is not only like the balance and the joy you get from the job, but then you found your husband. So it's like the two birds in one stone. So I want to keep talking about software engineering, but you brought up your husband, and like just quickly, would you be able to share a little bit of how you guys came to be, or like the part that you shared also in your previous podcast of that rebellious side in terms of choosing to get married, right? It does show also that first time maybe where your people pleasing of your parents was not the priority almost in this big decision. And so I would be curious if you could give me like a little bit of that, and also the story behind it.
So for the longest time, you know, as I told you earlier, I wanted to please my parents. But as I got older, I came to realize that I can't just live for them.
When do you think that started coming to you? Because it had to have come before Chang. Otherwise, I don't even know if you would have had the courage to do that, right?
Exactly. I think that moment came when I decided I'm going to quit dentistry.
Okay.
When I made that first decision by myself and told my parents, and they were supportive, but
you made the decision first.
when I first told them, it was like I was taking control of my life. You know, I'm not going to rely on someone else to, like, even the tuition, right? A part of me is going to rely on them to help me with the tuition before I get settled. There are just so many things I was dependent on them for a long time. And I knew that I just have to take control of my life. I can't continue to live for them. My childhood was, I told you, I was not a child because I was pleasing them, right? And if I continue to live like that, I'll never be me. I'll always just be that little Kiju who never got to be what she wanted to be because she wanted to please her parents. So I had that realization around that time. And when I met Chang, I did not like him. But after his continuous appeal, and as I got to see what an amazing person he really is, I knew that this is also a decision that I have to make. I really hope that my parents would be on board, that they would be really supportive, and that they would trust that this is the right decision. And that was the first time that they actually disapproved of my decision. They had never said, Kiju, you're disobeying, this is not right. They never talked to me that way. though they never let me be a child, they also really respected me.
Right. Because you were doing what,
Yeah, but this was the first time that I actively rebelled and they were shocked. What happened to the Kiju that always says yes, that always listens? It's interesting how it worked out that way. That did not waver me. Yeah. I did feel discouraged and I did bring it up with my husband, my boyfriend at the time, saying maybe we're not a good fit. And like we were close to breaking up, but ultimately he was really strong and he helped me to have the courage also.
What about Chang what was so good about it? Like, what was worth that fight? You know?
Yeah. I really respected him. When you're young, you and your friends talk about like, oh, what's your ideal type? And for me, it's like, I always said, even as a teenager, I'd be like, someone I can respect. And I think
those words never came out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I think it's like I really wanted someone who's really family oriented, but most important, you have to be someone I can look up to. And I think I felt that looking at my parents, because though they loved each other, I don't think my mom respected my dad. And I think there were conflicts related to that issue. And seeing that growing up and seeing all those, even the fact that my dad got scammed was because he's so naive and like, he's like a third brother for me sometimes, and that's exactly what I don't want in my husband. I want to be able to trust him and respect him and give him ownership of the finances and, like someone reliable. When I saw Chang, the first reason why I felt like I really respected him was he went through a lot in his life, not just family stuff, but he started businesses and it flopped. He's gone through hard times and got himself back up. At the age of like 30, I don't know how old he was at that time, maybe like 32, 33, he decided he's going to be a software engineer. He's like very bold and when he sets his mind on something, he can do it. So I respected that of him a lot. During that time, he was not doing well financially. I mean, imagine like this guy failed his business and he's now saying he's going to change his career and go into software engineering, and it's a hard time. And I got my job first. After 3 months after I got out of boot camp, I got a job in Silicon Valley. And we thought that Chang would find a job pretty soon afterward. He would follow me to Silicon Valley, and our relationship would continue. But it took him a year. And then he finally got a job and it was in Arkansas. Right? So it was even before that time when he didn't get that job. He was working at Trader Joe's. He was Ubering. Like it's hard. Yeah. But he's not ashamed. Yeah. Which is so cool. Like I'd be so embarrassed. But he's so proud of what he's doing. And he just doesn't give up. And he is going through a hard time, but the way he treated me was exactly the same.
It didn't like project onto you.
People do that. I do that. When I'm going through a hard time, I let it out on the people I'm closest to. But he has never done that. He was always sweet. The last thing, it seems a little trivial, but when we were dating, he would open the doors for me, like car door, everything. And I said, if you're not going to do it for the rest of your life, just don't do it. Because I know that the moment you stop, I'm going to get so disappointed. Yeah. Just don't do it. I was just basically telling him, just don't do it anymore. But he was like, okay, I'll just do it for the rest of my life. And he still does it. 5 years later. Actually, now we've been together like 7 years. So he's never stopped. Unless it's raining, I'm like, just don't open it, just go. And he would still try to open the door for me. He's always the same. So sweet. So lovely.
It is crazy because since we do know each other in like a small group setting at church, that is one of the things that really stuck out about you was how you clearly respected Chang. And to see that was something you wanted since you were young Kiju, and like one, that's like a habit because he is a respectable person. But I think even in like, whether it's like faith decisions as well, or areas where it's easy for the woman to just try to make it happen or like do certain things, I feel like you really have always put him and his like opinions or his pacing above what you would want. And I think that's like another place of respect that is often forgotten or like not as thought of, Kiju said this saying to me because, I'd be talking about Matt all the time. And she just goes, I'm going to butcher it. But because I think I was saying something about probably comparing me and Matt in some way. And then she was like, when you treat your husband like a king, that doesn't make you a peasant, that makes you a queen. And I was like, oh, okay. Something where it was like, maybe I was frustrated with all the little duties I had to do, but I think that those words really stuck with me, and really my own mindset shift of like feeling unappreciated maybe, or certain things, but rather acknowledging the different roles we're called to carry in our marriage, right? And as I do love on Matt to remind myself of who I am and who he is, and then ultimately who we are under God. But I think that was really helpful, and like I feel like you always carry those perspectives, where it doesn't mean like you guys are happy all the time, but I think that respect being one of those like cornerstones for you guys really puts, because a man needs respect, so that's very smart that that's what you had to put in your criteria, because the other criteria is just flee with time,
Yeah.
So.
Have you heard of that saying, a man needs to be respected to love? And a woman needs to be loved to respect.
So it's a cycle, right?
Yeah.
And like, I feel like y'all's cycle started healthily, right? And so that will be that cycle. But I think for a lot of marriages that started off broken and whatnot, it's like, I know I have to respect, but I will do it with the love. But I don't love her because of, so it's like you're proof of what that could look like from that start. And I think even respecting Chang to fight for y'all's marriage, knowing that it's because he's a good guy, not like someone that, is clearly not good for their daughter, like in that way. And I think the praise report is that right today, your parents, and especially your mom, loves him. And so it's like, I think that's so admirable, because sometimes we are scared to disobey our parents. And while we're not recommending you to disobey your parents, but right, when it comes with these types of places from this type of heart, that's also really cool to hear. And
Yeah,
like,
don't disobey your parents, but advocate for yourself.
Yes. See, a great way to put it. So then let's transition into being a woman in tech. And like for you, I remember you even sharing like that's not something that's often seen, and you wouldn't think of that. And like while there are more women in tech coming into this field, it's almost like then they are pedestaled. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but it's like those few are highlighted. But it doesn't mean that there's enough in this space. There's more room for more women to join this space, right? Which is what I personally feel like we highlight those few to make it seem like that representation or that diversity is there. And while it is growing, there is that space. And so I'm curious for you, like, how do you allow yourself to come into this space, be a woman, and represent your identities in like race and gender and like all these things that like are important to you? What has that looked like, especially since you started in COVID too? So just kind of paint me a picture of getting into that job that is for you, making you happy.
The first job that I got was in 2018. And before COVID, I was going to the office in San Jose, and our team was so small, but there were 4 women, 1 man, or 2 men.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I was the only engineer out of those women.
Okay.
So I didn't really feel at first that lack of diversity. And then I moved teams into an all engineering team, and I was the only woman in like a sea of men, literally maybe like 20, 25 people total, and I was the only woman.
Yeah.
And thankfully, during that time, I didn't have to go into the office. I think that would have been very different and isolating if I had to go into the office. So much respect for women who actually go into the office.
And face that.
Yeah. But for me, I was thankfully very lucky. I was remote that entire time. But it was strange, when we would do our stand-ups, we would do our meetings every morning, and I would see all those names, we would do all of our reports, and I am the only female voice in that room, in that call. It is weird, but thankfully I've never felt any, prejudice or, because I think the common thing is people say tech is like the bro world, right? I never had a chance to feel like I'm not part of that world because because I'm not in office, so I'm not part of those, water cooler talks, and we don't have to talk about sports all the time.
Hey, but you watched the Dodgers all your life.
That's
Sorry, continue.
The tech guys are not interested in baseball. They're more interested in like cricket. Because we have a lot of Indian Americans. I don't know, like football, basketball, but yeah, so I didn't feel that segregation just because I'm a woman, but I did have an incident where I felt like, oh, this might be like what it's like to be a woman in tech. And that incident was maybe a few years ago. I was interviewing a candidate for a role, like a more entry-level role. And I gave him a very simple question. Like he had to solve this coding problem, and it's not hard. Like I purposely don't choose questions that are overly hard, even though a lot of tech companies do. But I knew that this would accurately assess if he's up for the task. 5 minutes, 10 minutes goes by. He has no idea what he's doing. And he's like, I've never learned this before. You know, I never knew that I have to learn this. And I was just thinking, there's no way you cannot know this and call yourself an engineer and apply for this role. This is the most basic thing. So I got frustrated, but I tried to keep it hidden. And I said, this is a very basic question. I'm not asking you anything that I don't think is fair, because that's what he was kind of alluding to. And then he started berating me, like, you're so unfair, like, you're so mean, you're so rude. And I was like, what is wrong with you? I am interviewing you. Yeah. You are a candidate. Yeah. And he was accosting me. And I got so frustrated. I made sure I wrote everything down. Turns out he reported me to HR saying that this interviewer was really rude to me.
Oh my,
thankfully,
who
my
does
notes
he think he is?
And I had all these notes, thankfully, that said exactly what happened, exactly what he said. And so my manager told HR, you should blacklist this guy.
Yeah.
I don't know if they actually did. But during that time, I totally felt like if I was not a woman, I don't think he would have talked to me this way.
Like, how can he just... Sorry. Yeah.
I'm positive that just the way he was talking to me, I knew that if I was a man, he would at least have some respect for me. But from the beginning, he just didn't have any respect. And that's why it came to this point. That was the only incident for me where I felt like this is not okay. And it sucks to be a woman in tech. But, you know, no one really, I've never experienced any other times where someone has looked down on me because I'm a woman, think I'm not smart enough to do coding because I'm a woman. And I've heard a lot of horror stories where those things actually happen in the workplace.
Oh, okay. So do you prefer the workplace or do you like the remote?
I love remote.
I don't know. Some people, remote. You know.
Some people need that. Yeah.
I don't know what I would want. Because like the virtual remote world really boomed after COVID, right? And that's when Jaden was born. So just different lifestyle since then. But I'm always curious. Like, I feel like I wouldn't get as much done if I'm always remote. Like, I do think I would need some like human interaction.
I think I spent way more, because I did spend about 2 years in office. I think we waste most of our time getting snacks, getting coffee, getting lunch.
Yeah, that kind of stuff I'm glad. Because that was like a waste. I remember one of my jobs, I was just like, this is such a wasteful time over
and
here.
Commuting sucks.
That's true. That is true. Yeah, commuting did suck. So when you do have your time, like, do you do your projects in between if you have off days?
My DIY projects? I used to kind of make time throughout the day, but now I've really let go a lot. So either it's in the evening but you know, if I'm using power tools, I can't do it after a certain time because it's really loud. I think it's mostly reserved for the weekends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that you are 2018, 6 years into this career, are there certain dreams or hopes you have within this field in particular, or more so life overall? Like, what does that look like when you think about blending it?
In terms of career, I'm not very ambitious. I used to be at some point, but I think I realized that ambition was not about the career, but about money. It's just like what the paycheck that comes with the title. That's what I was more interested in. I've come to terms with the fact that my job is not my life, where I'm not really passionate about engineering. I think it's a great job for me and I think I can do well, but I don't need to be like a director or a vice president of whatever, you know, I don't need that role for me. I hope that I can continue coding instead of just being a manager, because that's what typically happens as an engineer. You kind of go up the ladder and then you become like a more managerial role where you do less coding but more meetings. Like I hate that because there's a lot of politics involved in corporate, and I'm already feeling the side effects of the politics stuff. So I don't want to be a part of it. Eventually, I would love to retire.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Because Enneagram 3s can have a tendency to be like workaholics. And so hearing you say that shows like a lot of health in that kind of response to really let go, you know? Do you have that workaholic tendency in other areas of your life that translate? Or do you feel like you've really reached kind of a balance, like a healthier mindset overall?
This year, I've really reached that healthier mindset and balance. But before, I wanted to excel at every single field I was doing. So even with my engineering, I signed up for a course that's $300 something that I would not have been able to do on top of my DIY goals. And, you know, I was overly ambitious in every field. And yeah, I've come to terms with the fact that I don't have to excel in everything, but being good enough is good enough.
Wow, amen. We can be mediocre. I'm just kidding.
I did not want to use that word for some reason, but good enough.
Mediocre is just but like enough.
Yeah.
Enough is a great word.
Yeah.
I am also curious, like for you who did grow up like wanting to please parents, how do you approach authority or leadership? Like how did that affect your maybe leadership style, but also how did it affect how you might approach those that are around you in leadership, whether it's pastors, whether it's bosses at work? I don't know. I'm curious if that is something you've reflected on.
That is an interesting question that I never really deeply thought about. But I think I don't really respect authority. I am quick to find fault with them. So that gives me reason to not respect them. And maybe it's my upbringing. I'm just thinking out top of my head, maybe growing up, seeing my parents who had absolute like authority over me at the time, but also seeing how flawed they were, maybe that made me lose trust in adults. That could be part of the reason. But I always have this like desire to not rebel is not the right word, but fight for myself. So even at work, we have this, he's no longer with the company, but he was very demanding, and last minute, he would request all these changes. And I remember writing a long spiel ready to send to him. Like, this is not fair. I'm standing up for, you know, my team, me, all that stuff. And I wrote this long paragraph, but just for sanity check, I sent it to my coworker. He's like, don't send it. I was like, you're right. And I didn't send it, you know, but I always want to fight for people that are being oppressed, or like, even if that means it's me, or if someone's in the wrong, I want to make sure they know that they're in the wrong.
I see. I think that, right, that's good, the advocacy, but also having those checkpoints of how that is affected from your past, and like how to make sure those things are check-ins in that as well.
I actually just thought of a perfect example of what happened.
Okay.
So when I was working at the dental office, I was working for this guy. He was the dentist, and his wife was at the front desk. And we were having construction in that office. One day, he requests one of the dental assistants. We were all UCLA students at the time, and she was 2 years younger than me, so really young. He asked her, "Can you carry these boxes with me to my apartment?" And these boxes were really light. There was no way he needed her. But I didn't hear it. I didn't see what was happening. I was just told about it after. His apartment, we were in Santa Monica. His apartment was like very close. And she told me that he thanked her, and he hugged her and kissed her, and just kind of basically, you know, he sexually harassed her. And she told me about it after she came back, and she was shaking. And I was like, what? Well, we're going to report this. And she said, no way. And a lot of this, the reason is because we're all students. We're all trying to go to dental school. We all wanted recommendation letters from him. So she didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. But the resentment and the anger was just brewing inside of me. And I needed him to know that I know. I needed him to know that this is not okay. You're not a good person. So I was really, really, really rude to him for months. He calls me. I just like stare at him. Like, yeah. And I was still a coward, because I should have just, like, who cares about the letter of recommendation? I should have just called him off or reported him or something. But the victim was not wanting to speak either. So I didn't know what to do. And I think I was still young and just lost. One day he called me into his office, and he's like, hey, so I noticed like you've been different lately. Like, what's going on? If something happening at home? And I was like,
something happening.
Excuse me. I know, you know exactly why I'm disrespecting you. I know exactly what you did to my friend. I don't respect you as a doctor. I don't respect you as a person. So if you don't want me in the office, it's fine. But I need to hear an apology from you. And tell me that you admit what you've done. And he did not admit. He's kind of admitted it by saying, a lot of dentists have weird addictions. And even the dentist across the street, like he gambles and blah, blah. He started talking about other people's addictions and kind of admitting his own, right? And that ended at that. And maybe that was another push that made me want to leave dentistry. But, my letter of recommendation was at risk, right? Because he was the only person that could have given me that letter since I've worked there for so long and all that stuff. But I couldn't hide it.
Yeah.
Like it was visible on my face, my words, my actions.
If you can't hide it anyways, might as well confront the issue. Wow. Well, did you do that with your parents when there was an issue?
So the way I process things, whenever someone upsets me or maybe it's something I did, I always need time to think about and rationalize it in my own head. And then when I know that my reasons are good, then I can confront someone. And so confronting was never a problem for me. So I would very easily talk to my parents and kind of like rebuke them. Almost like the roles are reversed. I'd say, this is not right. But of course, it's very different with parents. And it took time. But yeah, I think I'm pretty direct with my words.
How do you feel now with like your relationship with your family now as like the Kiju you are today and like really healthy? One, there is distance in family here. But yeah, what does that look like for you?
We have very good boundaries. I think it's very healthy.
And it's respected on like...
A lot of it changed after I made that decision to marry Chang because the way my mom treats me or hears me out, she always says now, I'm decided, I'm going to listen to my children. Usually when I tell her something, she would have been like, oh no, whatever. No, like she might dismiss me sometimes, or she might have very strong thoughts of her own. But now she's a lot more receptive. I can tell that they respect me a lot more. I mean, they did before too, but even more now. But this hasn't just been about me and my parents, but it translated to my parents and my brothers. So,
oh, that's good. Wow.
I think it's been good.
Yeah. Also, something is like, I think emotions are easy for Enneagram 3s to repress or just kind of ignore sometimes. And I am curious for you, like, I think you have this beautiful way of showing your authenticity or staying true to that or making sure that is a marker for you from what I've learned about you. I am curious like how your relationship with maybe emotions have developed over time, or do you feel like that is a repressed area for you? It might not be.
I don't think I had a hard time repressing emotions.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I was, if anything, too explosive with my emotions. Like quite literally explode with like shouting or anger or tears. But now over the years, it's been harnessed better.
Yeah.
I can translate that with words instead of just outright emotion. Yeah.
I've learned a lot, and I also see so many similarities between you and my sister. Or like, because my sister's the oldest 3 daughter, and I feel like there's so many similar, not like experiences aren't the same, but that mentality or that grit, even that you have to carry, kind of sounds like, I think of Gloria too, kind of in certain areas. But like, I guess something I would wonder is like, for someone who is the oldest of an immigrant family, what would you say to them or advice you would give them?
There's only one thing that comes to mind. 수고했어. Yeah. 수고했어.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh. And you say that to yourself all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
Maybe too much. Like, I just do one little thing. I'm like, 수고했어.
Hey, yeah. I mean, like making up for all the times that you wanted to hear that,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So, wow. 수고했어. Good. I love that. I did want to ask, is there anything we can look out for? She is a DIY content creator, Homely Build, and I didn't want to focus too much on that because I feel like you share your story so well in that area. And also, I had all these questions just about like you that like I never get to ask you, you know? So I feel like you were able to really open up your heart in that way. But I also did see like, you know, your own battle within content creating of how to stay authentic and true to that. And so I would be curious if you have either, advice for content creators or even just sharing a part of your heart in that area that is such a passion for you.
You know, when I first started sharing on Instagram and all my DIY and crafts, I was a fraud. I wanted to just be this perfect lady who transforms her house so easily, so quickly. And I would fake it so that it seems like it took me a week, but it actually took me like 3 days. And the reason for that is like behind the scenes, I'm working even harder, but pretending like it took longer.
Yeah.
But then I don't know what I was thinking. And that really burned me out. And I realized this, that true creativity, true inspiration only comes from God. You know, sometimes we look for inspiration from the outside world, and sometimes we look for inspiration within us. But as a Christian, you realize you have both of those in God. You know, He is the ultimate source of all inspiration and beauty and art and creativity, and He has given that to us.
Oh, I love that.
We are a part of it. And so I really wanted to harness that. So it's not about for me anymore just DIY, building and transforming my house. It's about what are God's gifts for me? How does He want to use me? And media these days is so toxic. It's so dark. And if I can just be even a tiny bit of the salt and the light of this world, you know, it doesn't have to be anything grand. And I think that's what I battled with for a long time. Like, I felt like somehow I have to be so influential and so, I don't know, either you have to be really rich and donate all your money or give up everything and just move to Africa and be a missionary. You know, like I thought it was so radical, but I realized like it doesn't always have to be radical when you want to express God's love He's given to you. It could be that whatever God gave me, I can use and harness and manifest it in different ways and be a source of good influence to somebody else, right? And in the sea of toxicity.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I'm learning. And the only way I can do that is I have to be authentic.
Yeah.
Like I have to be really me. Like I can't fake it. Like now my thing is like I like to make YouTube videos and it's not always about DIY. Recently it was about my dog and him losing fat, but you know, like whatever it is, I ask God for His inspiration, His good influence. And I don't always talk about God in every video, but can someone see the things that I say and think, oh, this is good, and like continue diving and see that there was Christ behind all of this. You know, maybe that's not God's calling for me, but I feel like sometimes I do get the affirmation like, okay, I see you. You know, you're still trying to please me and I see you.
I love that. Well, I feel like that was the perfect way to end the episode. I think just reminding us like where does our identity come from, right? And then I think all those voices or thoughts and the lies that we've cultivated in our hearts since we were young, those like all start to dissolve, you know? And I think hearing your story and like I would never have known that there was like such an anxious little Kiju, you know, or a young Kiju, right? Because of who I get to know today. And I think it is beautiful to hear how God was like walking with you and like developing your story and now you and Chang's story above your family story now, right? And so I really appreciate you sharing with me today, Kiju. I have one last question and it's if you were a fruit, what would you be and why?
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm going to say a pineapple.
Oh, okay. Why?
Because externally it looks kind of prickly and rough. And because I've heard a lot that I look cold on the outside and hard to approach all my life. I hate that.
Yeah.
But I do see where it comes from. But inside, I'm like, I'm sweet.
Yeah, so sweet.
Sometimes a little sour.
But like the sarcastic sour too, you know? It's all,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I do. Yeah, that's true. I would be scared to talk to you. I'm just kidding. But I feel like you've been one of like those sweet blessings, whether it's in cell, right? Mainly, but just getting to hear you and like your heart behind things. It's so unique, I feel like, and it's so inspiring. And so I'm glad that you are using your platforms now in such a way that's healthy for you, but because you do have such like a gift. Like if you haven't checked out yet, she has this one video that's like a lot of views too, but it's so good. It's like she turned 30. It's like Woman Cave, something like that. Oh my gosh. But I was like, I think I was moved to tears and I don't even know why. Well, it was like your reflections and your questions. And I think you have this beauty of making something visually pretty and like fluid, but then the words and like the narration behind things as well. It's like you're really living a story. And so I'm glad that you're practicing this new, not new hobby, but like just building upon, you know, you don't have to stay fixed in the DIY itself, but the growth mindset.
Yes.
So I'm going to get that book. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for your time. And I hope you guys enjoyed another episode of Call